Hiya, folks. Hiya, folks. Man, it's really hard to drink this with this mic. Hiya, folks. Man, it's really hard to drink this with this mic. Hiya, folks. It's really hard to drink this with this mic. Hiya, folks. Mortar Caner, hello. I know. Big surprise. Mortar Caner, hello. I actually returned. Big surprise. The following Mortar Caner, hello. I actually returned. Big surprise. The following Mortar Caner, hello. I actually returned. Okay, let's turn that off. Yeah, I know. We're definitely trying to make it a habit around here. Paul, Joseph, myself. We should be doing this every month now. That is for certain. But I do have to say, as I'm staring at this thing, I'm realizing I'm starting to feel guilty. I've been looking at this thing for basically since Comic-Con, and I've only spent time on this project here, trying to figure out how to get the time in here to finish the Star-Lord. So last stream, I was going through working on the helmet. I got some decent work done, but I'm going to take a break and spend today blocking out this Star-Lord gun, which I've done. Mostly this is just going to be a lot of more clean surface modeling. Try and get into some Booleans and just mess around. We'll see what we can come up with. Oh, you're double. Do you still hear? Okay, great. That was probably the Twitch feed. My bad. Emmy Boy Beats, what's up? Hello and welcome. So yeah, today we're talking about Star-Lord. So I've been kind of just kit bashing all these parts together, and doing a lot of Z Modeler, and the reference I'm gonna be, I don't know, I'm kind of torn. Like this, it looks like one of the prop guns. So I've just done a little digging online, but one of the prop guns for the movie. But this Nerf gun's looking really sweet. So I think I'm just gonna kind of combine some random stuff here to sort of kit bash and kind of make sort of variant, I guess, and then maybe get into some painting. I don't know if it's even worth painting. The plan is to print this guy, so I could paint for concept just to visualize it, but I really just need to get some nice details going. Okay, so yeah, if anybody that hasn't seen this model before, I really just have a bunch of sort of random parts here. Maybe we could just do a little expose, right? You can see all the geo here, just all these separate little components. And then I'll probably just go through, and I'm going to rely on Booleans to kind of shell all this and block this baby out. So I get my little stream spotlight going. I'm going to put this guy up here. And let me just move those images over. I got really lazy because I'll move around these images, and with these webcams, I'm not trying to put those reference images on my webcam there, but I want to be able to revert back to this state. So I made a macro button called Stream Spotlight, which actually, if I go to texture, save the spotlight, so I'm saving this in that root folder in those spotlights. So I made a macro to load this file. So if I move all this stuff around and I get all messy, I can just go boom, which is such a nerdy thing to be excited about, but I just love finding little things to macro for no reason. How long am I working on ZBrush? How long have I'm talking to you, Chris? How long have I been working in ZBrush? Is that what you're asking? Like in general? If you are saying in general, it has been since ZBrush 3. How about ZBrush 3 actually was when I really started, but when I went through sort of training, film animation school, 3.5 was when I really got going. I started working for Pixologic around ZBrush 4. So 4 just roughly after ZBrush 4. So I've been here for all the releases from R2 to current, which was R2 goes back to all the excitement with Dynamesh, and that was such a crazy time when we were just coming into that sort of phase of modeling and the tools that were coming out, Dynamesh and post-Dynamesh. Speaking of which, maybe I'll get into some Dynamesh here in a little bit. So first and foremost, like I'm looking at some of these sort of like mechanical details, these additional parts, and trying to topo model this is just crazy. So I got just like a low poly piece that I sort of blocked out, added some subdivisions to it to kind of smooth it. And I'm going to try and do some nice extractions maybe. So it's a piece kind of like this. So going in, I'm just going to make a copy of this guy. And this one I'm just going to delete subs. So looking at that sort of piece here. One of my favorite things to do is slice curve, and we could slice curve and extract. Like an easy way to do to get a very clean mask is we could go in with this slice curve, Control Shift, grab this guy, and I want to kind of match this angle here, and double tap Alt to kind of give me a straight line. Bump this guy up just a bit. So it'll give me that clean cut line, which I like to do this kind of stuff just to, if I ever need to go back and, like, I could do just an extraction, that'd be easy, or a panel loop. But it gives that clean edge loop, which I can now go in, and let's just grab those polygroups. So get that clean group, Control W to group that baby. Chris, you're asking for tips for beginners. Well, I mean, depending on what you're interested in, like, I will say, I guess I can speak from my own experience. Like, when I got started, all I really cared about on ZBrush was organics. Like, I started off the traditional way back in, when around ZBrush 3 and Maya, and trying to figure out how to model characters and things like that. And I started off in Maya just pushing verts around and doing a face with just vert pushing, which is a nightmare. And I remember the guy who showed me ZBrush, after that it was like there's no going back. I didn't want to touch anything else, so I really went in and I ruined a lot of sculptures. I tried a lot of stuff, but I think the thing with ZBrush is, like, I'll be even right now, I'll be going through doing a lot of sort of technical stuff, but when you're getting into modeling, in my experience, and one of the things I tell my students is, you only really need to know 5 or 10% of ZBrush. There's a handful of brushes, all the brushes you get up there, the quick pick, like the move brush, standard, clay buildup, like those sort of core brushes when you're sculpting. Those are what a lot of people use for almost everything. The technical stuff just kind of helps to, like, make refinements and get into this kind of modeling, but you kind of have to, the whole, like, walk before you can run scenario. But in my opinion, I tell people to just try stuff, and like, it's great that you guys have ZBrush Live now, where you can watch other people's workflows very easily. For me, that wasn't as common of a thing. It was more of just like, I would try stuff out, I would ruin things, and try and learn from those experiences. And then when I actually needed to learn something specific, coming to resources like this help a ton. But really just sculpt a ton. Like, that's my best advice to anybody, is just do as much work as you possibly can, and especially don't fester over it. One thing that we love to do is, like, you start a sculpture, like even me, like, I'm stuck on this guy. You work on the same thing for too long, you kind of stop seeing all the flaws and all the issues, or you're struggling to get it right. And one of the worst things that I did was fester over models for too long. It's like, at some point you kind of just have to rinse and repeat, start over, start something new, something fresh, and each time you do it, it gets better and better and better. It's just a lot of practice, really. The practice to me was the best thing ever. But watching ZBrush Live nowadays, like, you're in the right place for sure, because you're going to see all kinds of crazy people doing all kinds of things that you maybe never thought of. Nelson, you're asking, do you know if there's any plan for Pixologic to insert a better UV cut tool? Well, I couldn't say publicly at this point. We haven't announced any new information on UV tools. We did demonstrate and show off some of the UV tools that we were working on at the summit last year, but unfortunately I'm just not in a position to say at this time if we will or when that would be. But it's a good idea as far as UV cutting controls. You mean just like being able to slice off UV shells at edge loops and things like that, I'm assuming. Yeah, my pleasure, Chris. Anytime, if you have questions or anything, feel free to shout them out. And especially for this stuff, what I'm doing, like, it slows me down a little bit, but I'm kind of a talker when it comes to modeling stuff out, so I like to almost talk myself through it, so, you know, feel free to ask while I'm going through stuff. Nightshade, you're asking how to create macros, even a menu with different macro buttons. Yeah, that's actually, so what you're looking at here is my own custom UI, which I do a lot of. Oh, I'm actually noticing some really funky stuff. Pen QQ, my buttons got a little broken. So I've got my own. I've moved buttons around within the UI canvas at the bottom space here and at the top. But one thing that you might see me do is when I press the 2 key, that loads up my own little custom menus and my custom basically subpalettes that I've created with all the buttons that I like. A lot of times, like, I don't want to use the tray. I just want to be able to, like, close it and access those things. So with macros, like, first and foremost, if you want to do something like that, like any macro, we can just do this really quick. Like, I'll go enable customize. I'll go just remove the stream spotlight. So buttons, when you turn on enable customize, when you hold Control and Alt and click on any button, you can move it into a new position. So if you move it anywhere in space, if you see the white sort of bounding box, that's a position where you can move those buttons. But when you want to, say, create your own menus, first step is making the menu. So going into the custom UI here, you can start by going into config, turn on your enable customize. You can create a new menu, so I can just call this sol test, and this is going to make that menu. So then once you dock this thing, it's basically empty. So now this is what I do, is my 2 key, it loads up these menus here, which this is my ZBrush central handle is Sir Scallywag. So I have Sir Scallywag toolkit, so that would be the same thing as sol test. So it depends on how you can just start going in and, like, Control Alt, clicking and dragging buttons within that space there. But in this case, I like to do little subgroups and submenus, so that way I can open them up and collapse them and sort of condense it in a smaller space. But if you were doing that, you could go basically hold Control Alt, drag the custom subpalette, put it over here in the space. Now, once you put a button in there, just say we put the floor grid inside of that space. Once there's something in it, you can hold Control Alt and click on the title, and you can name this, like, floor stuff. Even though there's only really one thing that pertains to floor, we could do floor stuff. So then now this thing's collapsible, right? And one of the things, I'll put this back over here. And you're asking about macros. Like, I have in my macros folder, I've got a lot of stuff. Like, one thing I like to do is, it's gotten a little easier over time, but mirror and weld master. Like, I do mirror and weld in certain axes at the same time. But to do just like a macro really quick, I'll show you, like, any action that you want to apply. Basically, you want to go through and do, like, say you want to take an object and we want to do 90-degree rotation. We could go to macro, we could do new. Let's see if this will work. I did not want to initialize ZBrush. That's silly. Sorry, 1 second. That's actually a good, guess a good thing to run into. Could have sworn I quick saved this guy. Guess not. Sorry, 1 second. Let's grab Star-Lord. I'm just going to relaunch, and that way I'll get my UI. So what I did was, when you do a macro, it does ask you if you want to initialize ZBrush, which when you have a custom UI, that's going to initialize and remove a lot of stuff. Man, I could have sworn I quick saved that baby. Let's try this again, just 1 second. So some of the stuff I don't want. Delete you. let's quick save very fast. All right, so that like basically anything you want to macro, like we could go in and do like, you got deformation adjustment, so we can basically take like an object like this. I'm not even sure. Let's try this. So macro, let's go new. Don't want to initialize. So if you can apply a rotation with this macro end. So then you start and finish. You do an action, it records it, and then you go through and you can save it. So where you'd want to save is in the root folder, the easy startup macros folder. So you'll see these are a bunch of folders that I've made of things that I have made my own macros for. So if you want to do like, it has to exist within a folder. So we'll do like transformations. And we'll do 90 rotation. All right, so then that puts it in the folder. So when you go into the macros now, each one of these little tabs is basically a folder. So if you take a look, you'll see now we have transformations, and we'll have a button that's named what you name it. So if you basically go in and if you click that button, you'll see it's going through and it's creating that action. So macros are pretty much that. You can do a series of actions. You know, you can do all kinds of recordings, but it's basically just figuring out what you want to do from start to finish and applying that process, and then basically going through and just naming things. So like I've done, this took me quite a lot of time, but like if I want to mirror and weld in 2 axes, an X and Z, X and Y, X and Z, things like that, I've gone through and made buttons and just placed them within a folder. So, I mean, really, it's basically just sort of organization. Like I figure out what it is I want to make, I'll make the names of those sub-palettes, and then just go through and fill those in with all kinds of stuff. But like here, I've just got like in my modified topology essentials, these are just the things I like to do a lot, which is welding points, deleting hidden, splitting parts, closing holes, that kind of stuff. I just throw it all into a menu. And then like with hotkeys, last thing I'll mention here is like to map to that menu, if I hold Control Alt and click on a button, you'll see ZBrush gives you, in the top left, it gives you a text dialog. So it says press a key combination. So now I just press whatever key. So I press the 2 key and then 2. So I'm hovering over that menu. So that means when I hover over it, I'm clicking it, right? So when I press 2, it's gonna go through it and capture that for me. Yeah, and you guys are asking about the, you guys got a bunch of stuff going on here. You're asking about sharing my Sculpting toolkit, which I actually have posted. Let's see real quick. Sir. Let me see if I can find this. User gallery. Okay, so it was a while ago. I posted maybe after the Division watch. Yeah, here you go. So right before, if you go into my user gallery and you click on this sort of like spaceship, one of my old spaceship streams, in here I posted the modeling toolkit and the model. This has the toolkit and the hotkeys, so it's got both of those files in there for you. It's slightly older than the version that I have, like maybe just a few buttons have been moved around, but for the most part it's all the same. But you guys can grab that there. Okay. Yeah, for sure. My pleasure. Yeah, there's some good stuff in here if you guys are interested. Like the Division watch I did. This is a little bit older, but using ZRemesher and live Booleans to build something like this, I tried to break that process down in the PDF. If you guys are interested. Alright, so back to this guy. I lost a little progress there, but let's just, so I'm going to copy, delete those subdivs. Let's just redo this slice curve. slice curve in this baby, and I'm trying to find that alignment. And then, so I'm just using this to maybe grab a, so I've got, in my menu, I've got double-sided for objects, which, I don't know, for you guys, I don't like not being able to see the other side of my model. So I always want double-sided on, but you can go to Z plugin, subtool, do visible. You can turn double-sided on for all subtools, which will help, but I always keep that button there just in case. So then, basically, once I get it, the slice curve gives me a perfect edge loop, which I can polygroup this, and this gives me an easy access to mask it. We could do all kinds of stuff to it, like we could take this with that polygroup, we could even just go to, say, Z modeler if we wanted to make this connected, and do, just extrude, polygroup. You can go sort of like pull that chunk out. But there's a benefit here that I'm going to get by doing an extraction. So if I mask this off, go to subtool, I'll just extract that at basic thickness. Accept. So that's kind of going on the inside. Now, one thing I like to do with pieces like this is with the extraction you get some sort of like wonky sort of edges. But if each of these major polygroups is unique, so the edge loop and the outer faces and those interfaces are the same, I just need to go through and just reassign these polygroups just quickly. So that's its own group. This one is its own group. Right, this, and I'm missing that part too. Group. Okay, there we go. Oh, one more. Maybe a couple more. So what it's doing is just picking up the polygroups from that base mesh. But now, so inner group, border, and then outer group. I do this a ton, but using this polish by features is going to go through, and basically if I open up this circle, it's going to go through and clean up those edges quite a bit. And even further, like I want to, this piece has kind of got a sharp edge there. So it's actually plateauing, and that polish, it actually starts to round it out more. So what I could do to offset that is if we just grab this inner group here, if we make a polygroup at one of these edges here, so just go in with, say, a selection lasso, and let's just hide this chunk, and do Control W to make that its own group. Now we got a polygroup edge border here. So basically where two polygroups meet, they sharpen. So when I go through and polish now, it's going to actually start to take that. I'm sure some of you guys have probably seen that before. Oh man, this is driving me nuts. This one needs to go with that, otherwise it won't work. There we go. Now we're talking. So that's going to go, the more I keep sort of pushing that, the sharper that's going to start to make it. And then we could even maybe just go in and try, I might just insert a couple edges. So I'm going to grab just this guy. Now I just want to sort of flatten out that top just a little bit. So I can turn on Gizmo, alt-click to position it, and maybe just kind of start to sort of move this up a little bit. So see, I'm kind of like forcing it to sort of flatten and straighten up at the top there. But one of the cool things about the polish is if I go through and now polish this, it's going to kind of start to line it back up into place. You see it kind of brings it back into position. So then all I might want to do here is just kind of go in, just kind of scale that. So the polish, when you open that thing up, it shrinks it just a tiny bit, but you can kind of fix that pretty easily just by readjusting and sort of repositioning. And there we go. You're saying the bevel looks good. Sweet, thanks. Oh, well, here's another. Maybe this one, if you guys don't know this one, hopefully I can show you guys some tricks. So now, like, this piece here is like, it's a flat piece, but then there's a little bit of an extrusion and maybe some more extrusions to kind of model, even just modeling off of something like this. The cool thing is, doing an extraction gives you a clean edge loop all the way across, which we can actually do some really clean extrusions on top of, as opposed to the extracted surface kind of gives you some wonky faces that you just can't really do much modeling with. We might be able to do some things like, oh, you know, like maybe just grabbing like this group, and we could do like polygroup, polyloop. So I just isolated that face, and I can make just a bunch of like shared polygroups at any clean edge loops, which we can then now take something like this and go do extrude, polygroup all, and just maybe like add some details to a surface like this. But what I want to do is actually start modeling up. And so what I'm going to do is, but first to show you off that trick, so when you have a surface like this and you got a crease, if I hold control and drag this bevel width, you see it's going to give it an actual bevel on that shape as well. So I can take that from that, basically that flat edge, and give it another little bevel, which is super, super nice. And then I'll probably just go through and model on top of that a little bit further. So maybe this little sort of stair step. So just make the face selection easier. Let's delete edge loop and go polygroup, single, hold the phone. One thing. Well, that's what I did with my other scene. I totally forgot. So this is just my own little sort of neurotic tendencies, but I always like to just use the default symmetry in x-axis. And I started modeling this thing along the x-axis for some reason. I have no idea why. I just think I forgot. So I'm going to turn off symmetry, go to the home axis, and turn on transpose, and just rotate this guy. Whoops. That must have a mask. Yep, it does. So you got to make sure you clear all your masks if you're going to do this, otherwise some things might stick. Yeah, there we go. So now I can turn my symmetry on in X and I'm good. I could easily just go turn it on in Z, but I don't know, just I'd have to do it for a lot of stuff, basically. So let's do polygroup just to get that. Maybe I'll do another one up here. It's looking alright. But all this stuff's kind of funky. Like, I'm going to need to make some adjustments. Like, what I want to get to is I'm going to need to solidify, like, all these parts are kind of kit bashed right now, but this is one sort of complete shell, and it even has sort of like smoothed out edges, which I want to try and tidy that up. But before I do that, I just want to extract out some of these parts. So here's where my menu comes in, right? Like to use it a lot. So when I'm splitting geo, I can grab just a chunk here, Control Shift X to kind of grow it out. Once I have the piece, I can press 2, and I always end up using this one the most, that modify topo. But here I have split hidden, so I can split hidden. I'm just breaking these parts off so I can model them separate. And then with the Z modeler edge close convex, I can just collapse that whole. because I might just want to modify this. Like that piece looks like it's kind of connected to this. I want this to be able to work in its own space there. Same thing for this guy. Yeah, so this is like if you ever watch like Shane Olsen or some of the other streamers, like when they're kit bashing like a character model and you have all the different body parts and things as separate objects, it's easier to kind of just move that around on its own. And once you're kind of good with everything, then we can sort of start sealing things up. It tends to be a little bit easier to do things that way, in my opinion. But you know, I see people work in all kinds of ways. But for me, this is just the most forgiving in terms of just making changes and stuff. Yeah, so like this guy, probably just need a couple edge loops in there. Do a Q mesh. I can just click to repeat. Oops. Let's go just do this one manually. Pre-drag. You're saying the lime green bevel. I missed it. Sorry. How long ago was that? Oh yeah, the lime green bevel. Yeah, that is so appealing. The stuff we nerd out about, right? And then another thing, like I don't know if you guys get into, I feel like I'm always repetitively using the same stuff, but I end up using a lot of polygroups and creases to tighten up edges. So when I smooth it out, it's super soft. But like one of my hotkeys is, for anybody new, group by normals, I have Control-Shift-9, and then geometry crease polygroups, I have Control-Shift-C. So anytime I just want to like tidy up all the hard edges, I just do Control-Shift-9, that gives me my polygroups, and then Control-Shift-C, then it creases. So now I smooth and I get a hard, clean piece pretty quickly. Instead of having to deal with edge loops and going back and forth in the menus, it just helps to kind of be able to bounce back and forth and see stuff smooth and then not. Alright, that's not too bad. But one thing I am noticing is like I did want to start to get some Booleans up in here. That piece is going a little bit further back now. It's going to about right here. So we could go just Q mesh and use the alt to kind of paint those faces. The only thing with this is it's going to connect it, but you see it kind of keeps going, which is kind of hard to, it's not this easy fix. So I want to make those level. I can just mask them off, inverse, alt click with Gizmo, and just use the flatten to kind of flatten those babies down. Or you could also do the, what's up?
Check your mic.
Oh, is the audio bad?
It's just low.
This thing's at max.
It's using that, not your webcam.
No.
I don't know. That's alright. If nobody said anything.
Okay. Give me a shout out if you guys. They were just letting me know that my my audio's a little quiet today. So let me know if you guys, if I do need to adjust it. I'll mess around with it. Okay, sweet. Mordekainer, dude, I'm sorry if I'm going fast. I would love if I could just transfer this stuff over to you guys. I mean, I don't know if you check out my streams, like I end up doing this stuff kind of a lot. So it ends up kind of like feeling monotonous to me, but hopefully you guys get a lot out of this. Because I'm just kind of going through the motions here, just trying to figure stuff out. But you know, especially for hard surface stuff like this, I kind of just end up doing the same tricks as much as I possibly can. Okay, where am I at? I'm on this piece right here. So I got that little face going up here, and I maybe want to get some grooves going. And that sort of shape, anytime I have sort of like a pill-like shape like that, one thing I love to do is grab a cylinder, turn on Gizmo, and open up, well, let's make this a polymesh first, and then turn on Gizmo. And let's go open up the deformers menu and grab this extender. So extender, what this does, allows you to just grab that shape and extrude it in X or Y space, basically. So grabbing the outside corners is going to extrude it like so. Grabbing up like this is going to go like this. So it gives you that quick pill shape super fast. So you can kind of go through, get that sort of rough out shape. And of course you can play around with like the tapering controls at the end of it, so just scaling it. But easy way to get a simple extrusion, accept it. But then like if you want to get really nitpicky, those edges are a little bit more, they're not as cylindrical around like those, they're a little bit flatter, sort of like scrunched in. So you could do something like this where you just mask off that chunk, inverse, turn on Gizmo, and we could just kind of scrunch that baby. And then mirror and weld in X space, so along that X axis, and that's just going to line that thing up. So then now, if I do my group by normals, crease polygroups, smooth it out, I'll get a nice little shape. Then one thing I want to do here is, so I'm going to take this, we'll call this like bottom plate, and let's insert that piece. Maybe just start kind of setting up some Booleans here. Alright, so then let's go and even, my favorite things ever, array, lock position and size, let's repeat it maybe 6 times, turn on that transpose, and then if we turn off, so we turn on, once these options are enabled, got our repeats going, we can turn off Gizmo, which gives us the tool. We can just go through, just click and drag the middle to move it, but then holding shift key locks it to the angle of the transpose tool itself. So then I can take this guy, set it to sub, go to live booleans, and now, so the transpose is for just moving and positioning, if you like to use it that way. But then I like to go back to Gizmo, and now I can sort of scale this guy, and then get my rotation in there. Maybe play around with that scale factor just a little bit. And then turning on smooth, we'll get that nice sort of look. Make sure this is punched all the way through there. And this is a little, maybe not necessary for this piece, but especially because I'm going to 3D print this guy, like, and this thing is actually tapering, so it's not going to work as well. But cool thing to do with that bevel is if you take a look at that edge there that's sort of protruding in, if we just do maybe just one of them, if we take this piece and you do that edge loop, hold control and add that bevel in there, you could go in and do something like this. If it was straight across, you'd get a sort of like a tapered bevel on the inside, something like that, if you wanted to bevel an edge. And then you could even go in with ZModeler now and do, say, extrude polygroup, and then push that in. So that way you'd get like a soft bevel edge on the outside and then an extrusion inwards. So that's only going to work in this case with an object that's straight across. But in this case, because this thing's kind of curved, it's going to be a little bit too much work to make that kind of detail work. Or maybe I'm just feeling lazy today. We'll get to that. Maybe later. Maybe later. Okay, so next thing I wanted to do was, I just want to solidify the gun parts here. So get this handle working, try and get some more sort of shape and sort of softening up that. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to isolate out, let's turn off my booleans real quick. I'm going to go through, disable all the subtools I don't need. It's really just the parts that make up that gray sort of handle. I don't need that guy. Or this, or that. So now this, for stuff like this, like you could use existing subtools. You see I'm turning some off. What I'm going to do is actually go in here and, even before we get to that phase, let's just do a little modeling on this. So I'm going to add some subdivisions to that handle. And let's just start sort of like working this shape here. So just trying to get a little bit more of that sort of bend and flex, maybe kind of rotate if I need to. Like you'll see there's some additional little like pieces sort of shooting up underneath, probably same for like the bottoms kind of rounding out. But I might do that here. So we can take this piece. Now for this, like stuff like this, if I want to make a change to it, I might just go Dynamesh this baby. Now we could even, it's all sitting underneath, I'm going to merge it, but I could take something like this. Maybe just do some softening and blurring. It's a little messy, but I can work with that. Might even be a little easier if it's not such a high-res Dynamesh. Yeah, I think I went up a little too high. Let's go like around 300. The lower that surface is, the easier it is to do sort of a softening and blurring on an object. So you just have less vertex points. Let's just do like a chunk down here. It's a little messy right now, but I'm going to clean it up. So let's re-Dynamesh that baby. Now we could take this and we could go into deformers and do just like no symmetry for this one, for the gizmo. You got to turn off symmetry. Then go do like a smooth all. So you can kind of go through and just kind of polish out that little extrusion that I just made there. And then when you're done, click accept. I could go through and re-Dynamesh it if I wanted to, or you could try and do like things like turning on Dynamesh and polish to kind of go through and sharpen out some of those edges if they are sharp. That's just like a little unnecessary for this. But now, like this is where like once I get the shape and I want to go through, and I don't like to, like if it's too high res trying to move this stuff around, it ends up being just, I get sloppy sort of curves. Like I like soft, subtle curves, are easier to move stuff around when it's basically at lower reses. Oh, this is like okay, I guess. But in any event, like what I like to do for stuff like this, if I'm going to make changes, like that bottom's kind of transitioning into that base where you see there's a gap here. So I want to maybe go in and do something like this where I can mask it off, and then I maybe turn off symmetry, put this thing to center and kind of start to stretch it out so it kind of blends. Because eventually I'm going to merge these guys. But then you get this, like, we can try smooth all to see if this will kind of tidy up that edge. No, that's not bad. That's helping a little bit. But all that stuff at higher res is a little bit more difficult than as opposed to maybe, say, ZRemeshing it. So if I ZRemesh this shape a lot lower, I'll get better masking, better blur controls, just being able to taper stuff a little bit better. So now this is where I can go in, and you'll see that mask is going to transition much better. So control clicking to blur. And then inverse, put that thing right in the middle, and I can start to taper that a lot easier, right? Speaking of which, another thing that you can play around with, even if I don't, which would be kind of beneficial with the ZRemesher version, is actually going into the taper deformer. Going in here and actually just grabbing this guy. Like we could go in and kind of start to sort of like figure, just using this to kind of taper that base and make it wider. And then this stuff, like I could easily maybe just like clip it. I'm a really big fan of the deformers. I like to use those whenever I possibly can just to do stuff. But it's also like just getting out of certain habits of doing things a certain way. Like I could use that taper deformer in a lot of cases that I used to use masking and blurring and sort of scaling just with like the transpose way back in the day. If you guys were in ZBrush then. Now we have the, let's make sure we accept that. Now we've got the gizmo, which is awesome, but wasn't always the case. That's looking pretty good. Now, what I'm going to do is I just want to soften up the whole chunk here. So this is where I turned off all those other subtools. What I'm going to do is add a couple subdivisions to that guy just to smooth it out. And I'm going to do subtool merge visible just to get these parts together. And actually, what I also probably want is to smooth out those other parts too. So this guy's got dynamic subdivs on. I'm not actually doing any real subdivisions. So you'll see when you do that merge visible, it drops them down to the lowest if they're using dynamic. If I give them a couple subdivs, let's just tidy those guys up. So I just want them to be nice and smooth for this part, I think. Oops, cancel. Merge invisible, so that way I can get a nice clean Dynamesh out of this. Whoops. Oh, 8 million. Yikes. No need for that. Let's just leave it at 128. Like, if it's, I want to keep the shapes. Try 300. Maybe I'm looking at, I'm trying to get around 1 million. Enough to keep all those shapes, but basically to get that sort of like plasticky or that like molded kind of shape, so it's like softer edges basically. Now that we have this, we can go back and we can maybe do that sort of smooth all, just to like blend it all together now. And then what I might get rid of here is also just like, I'm just gonna lop off. I don't think I need. This part or this part. Gotta think about this because I don't want to double up on the same parts. Basically just want this chunk right here. Okay, so let's go delete hidden, close holes. Dynamesh will do that for me. It's just a bad habit. Alright, so let's go back. And sorry, I haven't been checking the chat, guys. Water Keener, coming in with the quick save. Good call. Yeah, it's another thing. Just FYI, if anybody's using that custom UI, I just don't like. I don't rely on QuickSave very often, but I'm forgetting to save myself right now. Probably just because I'm talking so much. But I have my max QuickSave set at caps, so I just save when I want to save. But you guys can totally do that. Go back and turn that on if you want to. Alright, so I'm going to put this new piece here at the top. What I might do is actually just chop off the top and bottoms of this. So it's really just like well, how's that going to work? Let's try it. Okay, that should work. So now the piece is a little softer. Now I can move on. I'm okay with that. So now like this piece, I just gotta maybe do some refinements to this so it doesn't overlap. Oh, what happened there? Good call in the quick save order. Looks like that one just saved just fine though. 224. Una más, one more time. I think you guys just manifested that. That's too funny. It's too great. All right, and quick save. No, wait, which part am I missing? Oh, this guy. There we go. That's the one. Alright, cool. So one thing, if I do want to, I'm going to probably Boolean this stuff together. But all these, like, this was that pill shape. Like, eventually, if I Boolean this stuff with dynamic subdivisions, I'm going to want evenly spaced edge loops for like poly painting and stuff later, maybe. I'm not even sure if that's what I'm going to do, but like anything that has big, long, gapped sort of polygon faces, I'm just going to make sure I fill in wherever possible, like this guy and this guy. Oh, the spotlight's gone, but boom. Oh, that's so much fun. I love that. I've never actually thought about macroing a button to load my spotlights, but I'm going to do that all the time now. Because it's like, there's so many steps. Like, I'm going to go texture, load spotlight, figure out where I put it. You know, just so much time. Extrude all. I don't know what's going on with some of these parts, but I'm gonna just kind of eyeball this baby. So I'm looking at that little like orange sort of extruded thing going on in there. Slide edge loop, extrude poly loop. Alright, cool. So then this is where I gotta figure out what the heck's going on with this nozzle. So this guy, oh, I didn't actually get the, need to get the top part going with those, the same deal on the bottom. That's what's missing right now. Okie doke. I'm gonna make a copy of this guy. Same sort of process. Get rid of those lower subdivs. Well, let's check what the angle is. So the angle down here is 35. So what would be, we go over here. That one's got the little stair step. Alright, so I'll grab this mask, do my nice little extraction. That 0.02 worked out great. Give it just a little bit of an extra bevel, accept. And let's go back to this, oops. Make sure I get the right one. This guy, mask, extract. Cool. I'm gonna delete that extra one. Oh, but the only problem with that is it does have that base. I don't know if I like that. That's gonna make it a lot harder. Like, it's really just an external sort of plate. And let me see what that polish by features does with that little group down there. Yeah, not as good. I'm gonna try that again. I think for this guy, it's just doing a shell. I really just want the top part. I don't want that base. So what I could do is go back to that original mesh here, do that Control-Shift-9, so that way I get a polygroup. That's what I had with the bottom piece. I just didn't have it for this for some reason. I'm just gonna do it that way. And let's use those polygroups now. So just grab those outer parts, make that its own group. Alright. So subtool. Mask. Let's see if that, I'm just curious if it's going to give me those polygroup borders again. Yes, it is. It's picking up from something, but that base one shouldn't have that. So I wonder if I mask this, shrink this mask. That's doing it. There we go. Well, I'm able to solve what's going on with those polygroup borders, basically doing the extraction here with that slice curve. What it's doing is when I mask this, it's masking the border, right? And it's actually grabbing that chunk too. So one thing I forget to mention here is if we reverse this and mask it in this direction, you'll see it's actually going to bleed off into that purple area. So if I inverse it now, this is basically just tapering it off of those borders so it doesn't pick up the polygroups on that shape, which is, if you saw it earlier from when I started off, I was getting little random polygroup borders at the edge of these guys, which that's what's happening. But that, for me, that just makes a big difference for the polish by features. So I want to go through and be able to like tidy up these little edges and things like that. There we go. So you got some creased borders in there. Now what I want to do is grab this guy and figure out where I want that sharp edge to go. Say like right here. Remove that chunk, make that a polygroup. Now we can start to get that sharper edge. And then what did help a little bit was grabbing this little yellow group, which a little tip, like if you go Control Shift, like I'm going to just grab this yellow group. The selection brushes, if you have the rectangle, when you click on it, it's going to grab, it's looking at vertex points. So when you click on this one, it's grabbing purple and the yellow there. If I want to just grab the yellow, it's kind of hard to like to isolate it without a vertex sitting along that edge. But if you just drop in a single edge loop here, then you have a vertex point. If I Control Shift click, I can now go in and grab this guy. So that just makes it easy to mask that off, and then do that same little thing I did before, which is kind of pulling this down, flattening, just trying to get that into place. So I'm moving that a little bit further down below. So now if I clear that mask and I go through and polish, it should start to shrink a little bit, but make it easy enough to kind of go through and replace this guy where it was before. Sorry, I haven't been checking the chat. Oh, Mortar, you called me out on it. The little little vertical cut. I totally cheated on that one. I was like, I'm not gonna do it. All right, fine. I'll put it back in. Dang it. Or you know what? I got an idea. I'm just gonna leave it. I think I can figure it out without it. Bushfire. I love your username. Do you use ZBrush for hard surface modeling and retop them? Yeah, yes, I do. In a lot of cases, you can get some, like using these features, the polish by features and clean polygroups and all of that, you can get some really clean surfaces. If you do need like a clean topologized surface, then I always will go through that process and retop them. But for something like this, because I'm planning on printing it out, luckily I kind of don't have to, because I'm just going to basically Boolean stuff together and do the stuff for print. But if it's for anything else production oriented, then yes, I have to consider retopo after something like this. And for a piece like this, like, you know, like right now I'm concepting it out, and this would be easy enough to topo over. The shells are pretty cylindrical, and the shapes don't look too complex, like I wouldn't have a problem with it, but other things get a little bit more complex that I might not do this same sort of workflow for, say, like, I don't know, doing like a crazy like Japanese style like mech that's got all kinds of crazy like details on it. I might just get a clean shelled surface with topology and then just like use sculpting alphas and things to make it look mechanical on top. You know, it's like the traditional sort of approach with hard surface and ZBrush and other programs. But for this piece, yeah, okay, so to do what I did, like I masked it off so I don't get those weird polygroup borders. I mean, if you mask it off and make the polygroup, you'll see, just again, it's the mask selection is now bleeding over into the other side. But if you grab the piece, reverse the selection, mask it, then you'll see that's going to bleed over into this direction. So now I can inverse, do subtool, extract, accept, and I don't get any of those weird edge loops bleeding into that shape, which is kind of crucial here. But then for this little, let's grab that. pink group. Let's deselect this. I'm gonna get to that piece more, Kaner. I'm just trying to figure out. I might just use ZModeler for it. So I'm just making that polygroup border here, so it's gonna smooth better. And then now we can go maybe just like. And we could even just do this. Like we could go ZModeler. Let's undo that while we're in this stage. So that's its own group. Let's take these faces and do a polygroup, single polygroup for that. So now what we'll get is basically that's going to start to sharpen at that area. But if we just grab that group, mask it, inverse, let's go Gizmo. Actually, hold on, the masking process I need to actually grab it, reverse it, mask it. There we go. That's what I want. So I'm just going to take Gizmo to like roughly sort of, oh wait, that's not working out too well. Let's just do it in solo mode. Now, so I just roughly flattened it out, and it's a little messy. But then if we use that polish by features, that's going to kind of go back and start to open up that hole. It's going to start to really hit that and give me that sharp edge. So hopefully it makes sense what I just did there. But I basically just kind of brute forced it into the area, used polish to clean it up, and I still got that shape in there. And I'll just sort of like quickly kind of readjust here with the gizmo. And then another little trick I might just do is grab ZModeler, let's do extrude, polygroup, and just bring this border down just a bit. So we got a clean edge lip in there to kind of seal anything off. Alrighty, now we could do the same kind of stuff going on up at the top. Just grab this, maybe remove some chunks there, make a polygroup. So that border is going to come down about the same spot. I'm going to turn off light balloons for this so it stops flickering. Maybe just do this one more time. Or actually, let's do might just deselect some of these faces up front. Just to break up that little space in here, whatever the heck's going on. Or I could even go back and do that for the same piece. Doesn't quite, that's gonna have to just maybe be like a closed sort of shell. Alright, cool. Now what I'll do is, you'll see these long extrusions. I might want to go through and like polish up some of those, like that transition of that edge. Well, when it smooths out, it's actually okay, but because you're kind of going straight up and down on this guy, it'd be a lot easier if we do maybe just go through and polygroup any of these major face transitions here and even here, so it's its own group. And then I'm going to go through and insert multiple. You do same polygroup. Nope, actually. Keep polygroup. And just add some edge loops in there. So I'm just going to like trying to hold those shapes a little bit better. So maybe if I do this little polishing, it's going to smooth that guy out a lot better. Or maybe that's the crease. It could be that. Partially the crease. And then for this piece, let's go with those live Booleans. Now I could take that same subtool there and just make a duplicate and maybe go in here and just readjust him so I don't have to spend too much time trying to figure that part out. Set that to sub. I'm going to go back to that transpose. I can click and drag. The transpose tool is down here, but we can click and drag that point to move it up and then just sort of realign. Pre-drag, you're saying polygroup copying is another amazing feature. Yeah, the polygroup copy is super nice with the Z modeler. Just being able to like go into the polygroup option and, you know, capture a polygroup and assign it to another one. It definitely makes a big difference. Like kind of torn on what's happening up here. Let's see. So I'm going to shrink that guy down. Just go take these parts and then just close them off. There's just basically like trying to get that same sort of look and feel from the top and bottom. And maybe go insert multiple, kind of fill in that space. And what's next? So I just want to get some polygroups, some similar polygroups to do an extrusion. Maybe I'll just do polygroup, polyloop. Let's just go get a unique. Oops. So sometimes you'll run into like, I'm trying to assign a polygroup here, but I'm accidentally putting those insert edge loops back. Sometimes I'll just go tell this edge action to do nothing. So that way, and even the point action to do nothing. So that way it's only going to allow me to click and I don't have to deal with the sort of like sensitive or accidentally clicking something else from a different feature, whether that be the point or the edge action. So then now let's go extrude polygroup all. Cool. That works for me. That just needs to go in. Oh, but it does need to be just a little bit smaller. I don't want that overlapping edge. And what else? I kind of like these little groove cuts. There's like these little copper like groove cuts in these parts. Maybe we could set that up with a nice Boolean. Let's go insert a cylinder maybe. Set that baby to sub. So we can hold Control to click and drag and do a duplication, and then hold Control again to duplicate those. Let me just pull those babies out a little bit. Now duplicate them. Where's this part? Up there, so let's move this guy up. Up here we only have one, so let's just get rid of that extra geo. Looks like this baby needs to go up just a little bit higher for that shape to work. Okay, now getting into like maybe some final stuff. I do have that last little like nozzle bit going on in there, which there's really going to be no way to like flatten out that geo besides doing say like a Boolean. So what I think I'm going to do is call this like top shell. And let's go insert a cube. So the cube, like I want to keep some of those. I might want to keep this again for like poly painting purposes, like if I do want to have the ability to like paint on some of these surfaces after a Boolean, not to do like remeshing. I want to keep these guys a little bit denser. So I could go in, what I want to do is maybe just grab just insert a star, and let's grab the poly cube and just up-res this. Little bit shorter, just barely. That looks alright, I think. I do kind of like it protruding out a little bit further though, just to get a little bit more of that offset. And then probably I'm gonna take that and just duplicate this guy. Put this below him. Push that one back a little bit. Then I might just take this one and go move this up above this part. Sorry, I actually need to go to this guy. That's just the duplicate. We can get rid of that. So I need to keep that original piece lined up here. Sorry, subtools are getting a little crazy. I'm just kind of double stacking this Boolean cube to kind of go through and subtract here, and then subtract that outer shell piece there as well. Just to kind of break that up a little bit more. And then that gives me a better sort of offset here at the top, which that's pretty good. Now, last maybe a little bit before I go into any like little mech details is probably just get this little nozzle going. Just bring in a cylinder and do some quick modeling on top of that. Clear out some space here for some a little bit of a thicker bevel. Oh, that's just too big. Maybe not that big. Go back. Let's maybe do just one more thing. This thing isn't hollowed out yet, but if I wanted to, if I wanted that to be just straight through, if I could make that work, maybe we'll go move this one down. Let's make a copy. So the top shell piece is where I want that to go. So this piece I'm just going to use to kind of shell out the inside. So let's specify, grab this polygroup and grow this thing out. Let's go delete hidden and then close this baby up. So I'm just going to do close holes for that. I don't care too much about that geo. Tell that to subtract. There we go. So I'm just cutting out more of the inside, so that way I can have just something that kind of resembles. Let's just turn off the other nozzle just quickly. Make sure I get my creases working. This guy can now just go a lot further back. Sweet. That'll do. But this does kind of seem a little boring. Maybe I'll just grab just one slight little bevel up here for separate extrusion. I don't even know if that would even show up in a print, but looks cooler right now. Alright, so now I'm just going to kind of fiddle with the shapes here before I do a final kind of Boolean shape. Sorry guys, haven't been checking the chat. Huang is asking, how do you pop up the shortcut menu? The shortcut menu that I'm doing is the 2 key. So for me, this is I brought this up earlier. If you didn't check it out, you can go to ZBrush Central, just look for Sir_Scallywag, and you can grab my inside of this post with this spaceship. I can actually put this in the chat for you guys. I'll just kick that out to you guys. Hopefully you see it. But in that post, you'll see my hotkeys and my menu, which I have mapped to my toolkit, which is the 2 key. So I'm loading this thing. This is just a custom menu that I built for myself, which I kind of talked about at the beginning of the stream. So if you watch the replay, you should kind of just briefly walked through it. So hopefully you can get something out of that. But that post itself has got all the stuff. That's not bad. Oh, this one. What's going on with that? Oh, that's not in the correct place. That needs to go with the top shell. There we go. Now we're getting there. Okay, what am I missing here? Only thing I don't like is this piece. Oh, sorry, I was actually just remembering somebody else had a question too. Pre-drag, yeah, that is that you guys saw my Gattaca quote. I forgot I left that in there. That's been there for so long. Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies. I appreciate that you appreciate that. That means a lot. I have a feeling that one is probably, especially with everything that's going on right now with CRISPR and genetic modification, like it's only gonna, I feel like that movie's gonna get remade. I mean, it's already been made, I guess, in so many other ways, but that particular movie is just so good. Yeah, very underrated, definitely. Okay, so not too shabby. This is all kind of coming together, but now like the last little bit is like, how much of this stuff do I want to like go in and start adding a bunch of mech detail and kinds of crazy stuff. Like I might want to get into just kind of like getting some more, like I like some of this stuff, like there's all these little cuts and grooves and things, which honestly the best way to get that is going to be, we can use Booleans. Booleans might give a better sort of clean result just to kind of like polish stuff up, but it might be easier to kind of tweak the shapes first beforehand by just maybe doing some simple sort of like extractions and things. So like here, I might take this piece now. So this one is a dyno, but I'm going to make this go just a little bit higher. Maybe, let's see what 500 gives me, just so I can get cleaner masks on that surface. And let's just go smooth all, just to polish that baby up just a little bit more. Okay. So then now with symmetry, maybe I'll just go in here with like masking tool. Or it actually might be a little bit easier to even just go with the mask lasso. You can kind of like sketch out. Or actually, man, I think it's gonna be, it's always easiest to do this stuff with masking with the, like the lasso. Sorry, the lazy mouse and the regular. So going in with lazy mouse, maybe just doing like small cleanup work. So for that guy, let's just do a, maybe at 0.02 is going to be too much. Let's go 0.009. Accept. Actually, before I do that even, go back to this guy. If I do Control W, that'll give it its own group. Inverse that. Let's make this its own polygroup. I'm just going to shrink that border. Still giving me wonky polygroups. I just need to start that over. The solid group. So maybe I'll just go make this a little bit simpler. Start off with a square. And even now that mask isn't the best. I might just go up res a little bit further. Maybe go into like 3 million. Let's see how that works. It could be. It's just gonna give me more. Yeah, that'll be a little bit cleaner of brush stroke to get a more mechy like surface. Maybe I can play around with just doing like, just kind of like quick square like shapes instead of drawing it with the lasso. Just finish it off with this guy. Oops, not save. Maybe I should save. Or maybe it might be easier to just do the mask circle to get like a little curve. Okay, that works. Alright, let's try it now at a higher res surface with no polygroups. I'm gonna go a little bit lower, like 0.008. That works. Or no, that's a little too high. I want that to sit underneath that lip. I could start blocking this out. Eventually I'll probably merge it. But you know, we could do all kinds of like interesting stuff with just like maybe taking this base surface here. move that too much, I'm gonna start losing that shape. But what I maybe want to do is just grab these polygroups and just maybe take this shape and go, whoops. No, I need the polygroup. That's on polyloop. Whoops. That's definitely not what it's doing, but I kind of can't decide. I can go in here and just start no live booleans for a second. Let's turn that guy off. Sorry guys, just checking the chat. Tanner, oh hey, Tanner, how are you, man? Great to see you. You're coming to the summit next week? Can't wait, man. It's gonna be a blast. I feel like Comic-Con's already been forever ago, but summit is here. That's gonna be sweet. You guys will be around. I only have like 20 minutes left, guys, but I'm just wrapping up this last little bit. Let me just make sure I didn't miss any questions. Okay, looks like we're good. Will there be subfolders in the new ZResh? I cannot say, unfortunately, I could not say if that's going to be a feature, but that is a highly requested one. We're definitely aware that users are looking for that feature, but it's hard to say. We're still working on a lot of things. We got some cool stuff to show at the summit for sure, but I wouldn't be able to go into any of the specific details with you guys, unfortunately. That kind of works. It's not exactly what's in the design, but I kind of like it. So maybe I'll go QMesh. And I might be able to even just pump this out a little bit further, maybe start doing like some inset polygroup region and start beveling inside here. Just to kind of like make out that stuff a little bit more. Yeah, how many of you guys are coming to the summit? Anybody in the stream? You guys planning on coming physically? Or are you guys going to be watching online? Pre-trying a beer in spirit, sweet. Grim, you're watching on Twitch, nice. Yeah, I know. I'm sure it's I don't know. You guys are probably in all different states, and it's tough to make it if you're not LA local. We understand, but this is partially why we make sure we do the live streams, because there's so many people that just don't live here, that aren't physically here in Southern California. So we'll be happy to have you guys tuning in, and I'm going to be doing a ton of podcasts myself. Same as we did last year. Some of those will be partially visible during the stream, but then the majority of them will be posted up post Summit. Of course, we always put those guys up, so they'll be there. But I got a whole list of people I can't wait to sit down and talk to. It's going to be a blast. Or different countries. Correct, Motor Keener. You are absolutely correct. There's a lot of people in different countries. Robo Wheel, you're asking how everything's going. It's going great. We have a lot of artwork showing up right now. The office is kind of littered with all kinds of stuff for some of the gallery showings, and everything's pretty much lined up. We've been spending a lot of time the last couple of months getting everything squared away, but basically all the hard work is done outside of just setting up for the event. That's all going to be happening next week, and we go through and do dry runs, testing equipment, all that kind of stuff before we get through for the stream. But the planning has been done for this week, especially just about right now. Today has been pretty much solidified, so it's a good feeling. I'm happy it's finally here. Comic Legend, you were saying you went to Lightbox. Oh, so you came out for Lightbox, and that was probably the one trip that you could do, which, trust me, I understand that's a trip in itself. But I heard, how was your experience at Lightbox? I heard from really awesome things. I had tickets to go, and I wasn't able to. I was out of town, and I'm so bummed because I heard it was just amazing. A lot of my friends were saying it's one of the best expos they've ever been to, which is saying something, especially around here. By the way, I'm just making stuff up at this point, but I don't know, you guys tell me if this is looking interesting enough. I think I'm going to need to get some more, some more circular shapes going in here maybe. Something I could try is, let's mess around with this. Maybe to finish this off, we got 10 minutes. I want to, I've got some, it's hard to see, but there's some little round sort of caps, but this thing is kind of tapered. It's cylindrical in that way. So if I go in here and maybe what I could do is make an insert mesh with projection. So ZModeler, let's go insert multiple and add a bunch of edges. Brush, insert mesh new. Yeah, so if right now I haven't been doing this symmetrically, so if I modify top out, mirror, and weld, oh, whoops, yeah, no, that's not the right piece, this piece, mirror and weld, that's going to put all that stuff over on this side, right? But before I do that, because what I want to do with this insert mesh brush is if I draw this onto that surface, it's going to basically, as of right now, it's just drawing it directly out from that mesh. It doesn't, it's not capturing the contour in any way. But if I go to brush, modifiers, and I turn that projection strength to 100, then it's going to start warping to that shell. But because I added all those details, it's no bueno. But if I don't mirror and weld and I just use maybe this side, I can maybe go and wrap a little cylindrical piece here. and then do subtool, split, unmasked, and then we can take this guy, we can mirror that over, and now I've got this thing kind of almost sort of like following inside of that surface, where I can maybe go in and do some additional sort of like modeling on top of and have that kind of curvature. So go in and do like some polygroups to a couple of these guys. Let's do maybe extrude, polygroup. Robo Wheels, you were saying, oh sorry, I forgot about the, we were talking about Lightbox. You highly recommend it, huh? Awesome creators. Yeah, I mean, from what it sounds like, it sounded very, very creative in terms of the type of people they had there, and just the events that they were hosting, and the guests and everything else. Like, it was very well rounded, as comparatively to like some of the other ones that might be focused more on animation or more on like a specific thing like 3D printing. So that sounds really cool. Grim Reaper, you were saying you're not very good using ZModel. You find it easier to do poly modeling in other software. Yeah, I mean, I understand that. It's ZModeler for me was, I started off using other software as well when I used to do poly modeling. Of course, I do work for Pixologic, so I spent a lot of time with ZModeler, and I've gotten to the point where I'm able to model all the things that I want, but there are, of course, very specific things that you might be used to in other modeling tools that ZModeler might not have yet. But the bare bones basics, like maybe, I don't know if it's the menu for you, which I will say, the menu, I ended up spending a lot of time just doing extrusions, inserting edges, insets, that kind of stuff. But overall, I mean, it's a very powerful tool if you give it a chance, just to kind of get used to some of these things that just the menu itself. The menu has a lot of features and things, but yeah, I understand if you're. It's difficult to adjust to something new. For me, ZModeler is just, I find it much faster in terms of just being able to kind of quickly get shapes in a more creative way. That's kind of my feeling with it since we introduced this thing. But yeah, well, what I do at Pixologic, I work in the development team, so I'm in the 3D product development world. We basically helping to check features, come up with feature ideas. We basically think of it as more like a full-time sort of artist working in development, sort of like trying to get to know basically what you guys want, and looking at the features, how they work, how things should function, that kind of stuff. There are a few of us here that work in the creative development team that sort of focus on that area. So it's kind of just like being in ZBrush all the time, and trying to make the stuff as best as we possibly can, coming up with ideas, that kind of stuff. We all, of course, do a lot of different things here as well. We wear a lot of hats, but it keeps us busy, that's for sure. If you want another one of my responsibilities, if you guys ever submit support tickets, I'm there in the advanced support sector, trying to help out artists like you guys, studios, people that have issues and things, just trying to resolve any problems or anything that might come up for you guys. So if you ever submit a support ticket, you might see a response from me. But yeah, this is I'm kind of in ZBrush 24/7. I'm just kind of fiddling with this thing, but it looks pretty cool. I kind of like these extra little details that pop just a little bit more once I sort of Boolean all this stuff together. It's like another thing I might do really quick before I finish off is maybe go into that curve tube brush. And let's do, actually we want the curve tube snap. Stroke, lazy mouse. let's just do subtool, split hidden. Maybe like get some wires going in here. Mirror and weld, mirror and weld. Yeah, so just kind of starting to mech all this stuff out. So, yeah, it's one. Wrap it up here. Let me check these last little bit of comments. Let's see, where did I leave off? Grim, you're saying the lack of 3D gizmo that throws you off with poly modeling. In terms of just lack of gizmo features, I'm guessing. Yeah, because you may be used to using a gizmo or a physical tool to move those objects around. Yeah, like this is where, like when I use ZModeler, a lot of times I'm using a combination of things all the time. Like if I just want to move individual faces, like you do want to use the gizmo, grabbing, you know, just being able to grab a chunk, even just with, like somebody was mentioning, using gizmo, you can control and click on polygroups and basically pull those things out. So I use ZModeler to apply certain actions, but then sometimes, like if I just want to move stuff, I don't rely on ZModeler for that. Like if I wanted to just move this whole isolated area, I would isolate it out with gizmo, control click, and I'd just move that thing with the gizmo itself. Instead of, there are features in ZModeler, like you could go here, go to move, polygroup, and pull that up. But for me, when I'm modeling with it, I don't want to change my menus and stuff too often. So what it does is it remembers the poly and the edge actions that they were previously on. So usually it's on extrude or Q mesh. And one of the things I love about this is the ability to actually, like Q mesh will allow me to like extrude faces, and I can snap polygons to other faces, this kind of stuff that it makes it really, really sort of freeing. And even doing things like I'm going to break away polygons, I can go through, let's just say I take those faces, it remembers actions, and I can click to repeat, and I can basically go in and start to like chunk out, you know, removing stuff like this, which these are some of my favorite sort of ways of modeling. But it's always like a combination using masking to grab stuff and gizmo to move stuff, and then ZModeler. So it is a different way of working, that's for sure. Robo Wheels, you're asking if the UV mapping will be updated soon. Use Modo for UVs. So we don't have any. Unfortunately, I can't provide any new information on UVs or UV peel. That is still happening. We haven't officially announced any information on that, but all that stuff will be, you know, commenting on at the summit for sure. So I look forward to checking out the summit and seeing what we are working on. Sorry, I'm way behind now. Okay, sweet. Looks like you guys are good. You guys are just chatting it up. So one thing that's happening here is like when I smooth this stuff out, it's kind of rounding it out. I like that a little bit. It's making it a little bit more interesting instead of just like perfect hard edges. But like for stuff like this, I might be able to go in and just do a couple key meshes. So this should just click and drag, snap that. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I'm just gonna do a few more random extrusions. We're gonna call this a day. I gotta go eat some lunch here. Alright, I think that's about it for me, guys. This is about as far as it's going to go. So, before I do anything else, quick save. And I'll be picking up, probably trying to finalize actually getting this into the scene for the character, finish up the pose and all that stuff once I get this final Boolean mesh going. And then I'm going to have to really get into wrapping up like final details for the helmet and for this gun too, for sure. This guy's roughed out, but it's not quite there yet. So I'll be finishing that up next time. But thank all of you guys for tuning in. It's truly my pleasure. I'll be, like I said at the beginning, we're for sure going to be doing this more often, at least every month. So it's great chatting with all you guys, and thanks for checking it out. And I'll see you guys next time.